Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Hi, I'm Paul and I'll be your host this evening. And boy, oh boy, are there topics to talk about, especially in New Zealand rugby with the Rugby Players Association and New Zealand Rugby going into mediation tomorrow, apparently. So we'll be having a chat clearly about that and the private equity pieces around that. Yesterday, we had the Chiefs and the Blues announce that they're going to be holding a women's Super Rugby game as part of a double header of their game up at Eden Park on the 1st of May. So we'll have a chat about that. News has also come out about the format of the Minor 10 Cup for the rest of the season and also who the All Blacks or what All Blacks tests there may be this year as well. So loads and loads to talk about. And joining me to talk about that kind of stuff, first up is Stephen Harris. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Paul. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM, mate.
Thank you very much. And also joining us is Boa. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. Feels like a precursor for waterfront strike by the Dockers at the ports of Auckland. I hope it doesn't come to that, but yeah, wow. When was the last time we heard mediation between the Professional Contracted Players Association and NZR? But hey, I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is safe. For all our listeners across the ditch in Australia, especially Queensland, stay well, stay safe. 1 day into a 3-day lockdown.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that'll have any impact on the Super Rugby games. I know that it is impacting the other oval ball code over there with the Rugby League. The Brisbane Broncos have moved to Sydney until round 5. So that's 2 more rounds. The Reds are due to play the Rebels in down there in Melbourne next up. So hopefully they've managed to get out before any lockdown has happened. But that's we'll have to wait and see what's happening there. Evening, Jordan. Evening, Simon. And evening to everyone else who's joining us live. Don't forget, we're here at 8 p.m. live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And you can join the live chat there as well. Simon says the Brisbane AFL team were in Melbourne Airport about to fly home, but stopped before getting on the plane. Jeez, what a crazy world we're living in at the moment. And don't forget also that the show is available as a podcast as well, just through your favorite podcatcher. Before we get on to the main topics, though, let's just pop through some little bits of news. Liam Squire, unfortunately, has a recurrence of his knee injury, and it looks like that's going to see him out for the rest of the Super Rugby season. He might be back for Minor 10 Cup, depending on how that goes. But I mean, Stephen, with having had surgery on his hip and also knees last year, it's unfortunately looking like the beginning of the end, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely got that feel for it. I mean, I think it seemed like he just found his enthusiasm again, but one thing that's really can take enthusiasm away very, very quickly, and the stark realities of being a professional sportsman is injury, and boy, it may be hard to see him coming back. Maybe he basically gets that injury right, and hopefully we might see him during Minor 10 Cup. A little bit of speculation that he'll be joining Dale McLeod's Stags in 2021. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
I thought it'd already been announced down there. Or is it still?
Might have been, actually.
So let's hope he recovers and can take part in the Minor 10 Cup. Also, Leinster won the Pro 14, beating Munster in the final for, well, I think it's apparently it's like a decade since Munster have won a trophy, which when you think about them, Boa as being that sort of perennial Heineken Cup finalists, it's amazing that it's a decade old now, that kind of stuff.
It is. I saw internet meme, death, taxes, and now Leinster. So well done and congratulations to them. I did catch the highlights package, as I usually do with most of the competitions from Europe. Yeah, it was a good sort of game, and you have to give Leinster a lot of credit. They've been very, very consistent, and well, as far as Munster goes, I suppose it's something they don't want to get used to, but just looking back at how things have evolved. It's been I think it's been 11 years since they've won any silverware.
10 years, right? Yeah, 2011. Yeah, so very close. It will be, but it will be 11 years next year because they're not like although they've got the Rainbow Cup coming up, folks. So and they are still in Europe, but I must admit I can't see Munster winning Europe. There, Aaron asks also, are we going to talk about Wayne Smith's article? Yeah, we can talk about that as well. About the style of play as well. Finally, though, with Super Rugby, Aotearoa Super Rugby AU, we've got the Challenge and the European Challenge and the European Champions Cup, Women's Six Nations, Major League Rugby and Varsity Cup, all of that coming up this weekend. I will post tomorrow my predictions for all of those games, so you can check that out on nzsportsradio.com. That'll be published tomorrow. So let's get into our first bit of news. Let's start off with the announcement of a women's Super Rugby game between the Blues and the Chiefs. I mean, this is something, Bo, we've been asking for a couple of years now. It seems like a no-brainer, but finally we get at least one game.
Well, it's fantastic, great opportunity and good chance to show everyone, especially I've been a big advocate of the women's game, especially from a coaching point of view. Because I think, especially at the senior to elite level, there is more focus on a skill-based game, and you will actually see more, very subtle skills in the women's game as opposed to the men's game. Because, as we all see, there's lots of crash and bash, a bit of predictability. The 1-3-3-1, the 1-4-4-2 sort of attack structures and shapes. But whereas in the women's game, you do see a little bit of quite a bit of flair, lots of strike moves off the first phase. So yeah, this is a huge leap forward, and I guess from a commercial point of view, this is where the rubber meets the road. Will there be a crowd? Will there be a demand which has been hyped up? And we'll get to see those figures. So I think tremendous stage. At Eden Park, it's long overdue. So hopefully they can move from strength to strength.
On that commercial side, this is an exhibition game, so you people are aware. And whilst there are comments in the sort of press release about the girls are now contracted, this is the next step forward. The reality is it's just the Black Ferns that are contracted, and it'll be a mixture of Black Ferns and amateurs from the Farah Palmer Cup teams. This is an exhibition game. And nobody will get paid for this game. But Stephen, thoughts?
Well, there'll be definitely no U-turns from me on this particular subject, guys. Definitely a case of testing the waters, or giving it a just basically putting it out on the track and seeing how it goes. But yeah, it's super exciting as well. If we can incorporate, and we know even within the Auckland and Northland province and alone, you'd probably be able to put a very, very good teams just with those two provinces alone. I would imagine there'd probably be the odd harbour player, but I would imagine the majority of the players would come from those two unions. As for the Chiefs team, well, you're obviously looking at once again probably the two unions that would probably supply most of the players would be Counties Manukau and also Waikato. So if you think about some of the quality that's running around in those two teams, boy, could be a good contest.
I think you're going to get a fair few from Bay of Plenty as well. Remember, Bay of Plenty being the
yes, of course,
the home of the Sevens setup. So quite a few of the girls are based themselves out of Tauranga as well. Taranaki. Sorry?
It's quite a mouth-watering prospect, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Gail is probably the only player out of Taranaki that will make it. The rest of them, I think, they've got a much younger. And she's a Sevens player, so she may not be playing. She may be gearing up purely for the Olympics. So I don't know if the Sevens players are going to be available, but I've heard from the coach from the Chiefs about their coaching sites. They've got Chance Shepherd is going to be the head coach. He's from Counties Manukau. He also was involved with the Possibles versus Probables game last year, and also the New Zealand Barbarians when they took on the Black Ferns game. So good to see him involved. Latoya Mason from Taranaki, the ex-England international down there James Semple, the head coach from Waikato of the women's team, and then Mike Rogers from Bay of Plenty. A bit of surprise by that one, because I thought it would be Rodney Gibbs, who was involved in the possibles versus probables and also the New Zealand Barbarians. But Mike Rogers was the head coach of the Global Rapid Rugby team that they had based down there. So, Bowie, I mean, you know a lot of the coaches in New Zealand, a couple of good experienced coaches, and some learning their way.
Yeah, look, no question about it. Now, before I get to that, I know this has been listed as an exhibition. This will be anything but an exhibition. I think both these teams will be going at each other's throats. There's going to be a real feeling in this game, because they'll want to prove a point. They'll want to prove a point that they're good enough to be viable week in, week out, and have a fan base and a following. So there's going to be some big hits. There's going to be a lot of collisions. There's going to be lots of razzle-dazzle. And to back it all up, I think a really exciting coaching team has been put together. And I think we will see a lot of razzle-dazzle, because after all, it is Super Rugby. And as I said before, both teams will have a huge point to prove. And it's a very, very exciting, mouth-watering prospect.
Paul, I was about to say the other really good thing about it, if maybe having 5 teams moving forward, we realise once again probably the Highlanders, will they just start with the 4 teams, will they?
Yeah, so not Mike Rogers, sorry, gone blank. The CEO of New Zealand Rugby, Mark Richardson, I forgot the right name. He's come out today and said... Mark Robinson, sorry, thank you. He's come out today and said that they're looking at starting a Super Rugby women's competition next year with 4 teams, 1 from the South Island, and then Hurricanes, Chiefs, and Blues from the North Island.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it probably incorporates at least the 2 stronger of the unions in the South Island as well, obviously along with Tasman. But yeah, listen, this is another great opportunity for some girls who may never get that chance to represent the Black Ferns, or be part of a really, really good. I'm not too sure whether it's going to be the professional. I suppose how the Silver Lake pans out. We'll probably have a say on in terms of how that's, or not so much categorized, but or how it's financed. I should say, but yeah, should be really interesting.
So Simon said he's not a fan of having them at the same venue as the men's games. I'll be honest, I agree. I think 4 hours of being at one venue is a lot of time for rugby fans to expect them to turn up for both games. But I think in this situation where it is the first game, it'll expose it to fans of the men's game, and also it means that Sky have all their cameras set up so they can televise it without having to have too much extra cost on top of it. So from whilst I agree with him, I'm not a big fan of double headers as well. I think in this case, I think it works out. Let's hope that the women get to have their own venues, I think, for next year in Super Rugby.
Yeah, guys, one thing I have to say is this is probably the start of a long-term 8 to 12-year plan. Interestingly, all the numbers when it comes to participation and growth in New Zealand rugby, all the sets of numbers have seen an alarming decline, apart from the women's game. We've had about a 30% year-on-year rise in engagement and numbers over the last couple of years. It's been very, very consistent. So it makes perfect sense for NZR, and obviously we will be talking about this a little ahead on the show, which is this pending deal. There will be, once this goes through, there will be a significant amount of money being pumped into the grassroots game, so as far as women's rugby go in New Zealand.
Yep. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, Simon makes a good point here that the successful women's sports in Australia, by the Big Bash and the AFL, they have separate seasons to the men's seasons. Even I don't see that happening in Super Rugby, women's Super Rugby. I think it'd be a similar season, but it is a pathway. I've gone blank. The woman prop down in Wellington, who talks a lot about women's rugby, she made a good point that, look, this is a step that's needed for the W15s that's coming up, international games, we need this pathway for our women for that tournament as well. So yeah, all heading the right direction at the moment, if a little bit slower than some of us would like. Right then, so trying to let's talk about New Zealand Rugby and the New Zealand Rugby Players Association. Now, I think we've talked about New Zealand Rugby Players Association before and said how they can be in fact, a bit of a one of the most powerful bodies in New Zealand rugby, perhaps even more so than Alice Soper. Thank you, Stephen. That's right. That's the name. Even more so than the New Zealand rugby at times, and that's caused some issues last year with getting things agreed. But this time. Yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday? I think yesterday, a article in the Herald came out that a letter had been written by the New Zealand Rugby Players Association, signed off by some of the top All Blacks and some of the top Black Ferns as well, saying that they would not be back. They would not be signing off on the Silver Island private equity deal for New Zealand Rugby. What has emerged today is that letter was signed back in. Back at the end of January, and I think one of the things that you can tell from that is that if we've got mediation happening tomorrow, where the New Zealand Rugby Players Association, New Zealand Rugby, the Super Rugby franchises, and the provinces are all going to be represented, that tells you there's been discussions these past 2 months, which is good, but they have reached an impasse on this. Bo, you're better connected than most of us. Have you? Is there anything you can say around this that you've heard, or?
Yeah, well, what I can say is with this, the whole news about the letter which was written. I mean, Mark Robinson was very clear today when he spoke to the media that lots has happened since then, lots has changed, and also he emphasized a point where we as in New Zealand Rugby cannot continue in the same vein as they have for the last 130 years. I actually agree with Mark Robinson on this one, because the face of professional sport is changing very, very rapidly. The one thing I have to say, and I hope that he listens to some of the voices coming in from the grassroots sport, that a significant amount of investment from this equity, which is being pumped into NZR, actually ends up being put back into grassroots rugby, so that there can be a sort of rejuvenation. Because one area, as I said before in the show, where we're starting to see numbers rapidly decline is the participation of children, especially at the junior age grades, for club rugby. So that's an alarming trend. Even at my own club, I'm starting to see this, and clubs right across the country, and specifically in Auckland. So I think this is a really good opportunity to really get some cash into the game. All I can hope for is that there is equal representation where and how the money is going to be administered, and majority of it is not just going to be put into the professional game, which seems to be the trend pretty much right around the world.
Stephen, you want to make a point, or shall I explain what the deal is?
I'll tell you what, guys. Listen, the first sign of what's unfolding tomorrow is the fact that the Mitre 10 Cup hasn't been sorted out, guys. That basically says to me that the unions have basically said, can we just tie-ho on that just for now, so we can actually see where this particular vehicle is going. So I have a funny feeling there's going to be a lot of horse trading going on tomorrow morning. Yeah, we might let you push through with this deal, but this is what we want. This is what the face of this competition in terms of how we want it looking. You launched your McKinsey report over a year ago, and we've looked at over this. When you think about it, it's actually the perfect bargaining tool from the union. So it's they kind of hold a little bit of a casting vote, shall we say? Shall we call it from here? So, yeah, I just think there's probably a little bit of horse trading. Like I say, I'm sure you'll tell us all a little bit more about the deal. Of course, we've seen some of the numbers that have bandied it around. I think it's probably in the interests of these unions to be basically just just basically, should I say, just putting down a line in the sand, so to speak. And they've obviously got a few senior All Blacks involved, if you know what I mean. But on saying that, from the All Blacks point of view, about these guys talking about giving your rights away and all that sort of stuff, I'm a bit nervous when you hear those sort of comments coming from top players, because when the overseas checkbook gets waived, well, guess what? They're usually the first ones to jump ship. And as somebody who's been a former administrator, not so much involved in rugby, but involved in another sport, my standard stock line is, whether the sport are rugby players, soccer players, netball players, whatever, they come and go. Structures, however, you've pretty much got to have reasonable stands with your structure. I think that's what I'm thinking is happening tomorrow, guys. Whether I'm close to it, I could be miles off.
Okay, so what we're looking at, we're talking about a $465 million investment for a potentially 15% stake of the commercial section of the sport. Now, so what this would involve is hiving off the commercial sides of it. So your sponsorship agreements, the income from the All Blacks for tickets, sales, and those kind of TV deals. All of that will be put into a separate body, separate from New Zealand Rugby, that would still administer the game and would still look after grassroots rugby. But the and they would and 15% of all that income would go off to Silver Lake, and the other 85% would come into New Zealand Rugby. So what you're basically doing is you're swapping 15% of your income forever for $895 million. Now, $865 million, sorry. Now, to me, the big question is, how are you going to spend that $465 million so that you make sure that you get enough income to cover that 15% you're going to lose every year? How do you invest that so you get more back than you're going to lose? To me, is the big question. If you sell something like off like this, you never get it back. It's gone forever. So what are Silver Lake? What are the people you're selling to also bringing to the party that will grow that income again? So again, you're making more than you lose in the long term, and that you both gain out of that. Are they bringing enough to the party that will see that grow? Do they have enough? Do they have skills and knowledge that you can't get another way cheaper? And to me, I would be against this kind of selling of your long-term income for a short-term money pool of money, because if that money is then the question is, that once you spend the money, it's gone. So how are you going to spend that money? How is that going to create long-term income for the grassroots if you give it to the grassroots? To me, that's where that's what as a principle, I would think it's a bad move going for private equity. On the whole, I can see that Boa, you've already said you think it's a good move, that they need the investment now. How can you persuade me that you think that this is a good move? That's from a principle point of view, it's not a bad move.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, by investing into grassroots, the bottom line is we need to increase our participation rates and participation numbers. To do that, we need awareness and education around the small blacks right up to the junior grades. And there is a big exodus of younger players moving to other sports like basketball for a number of reasons. And guys, we need simplistic innovation in the grassroots game. At the moment, what's actually happened is the grassroots game has become stagnant. We really haven't evolved our models, how we approach it from a game-based model, from how clubs are being viable to remain afloat commercial. There's a number of clubs struggling. So where I see the immediate injection of cash is to identify where these struggling clubs are and work with the provincial union as well as NZR, so that the money gets put into the club, and there is a plan on how they can pull themselves back to financial viability. So this would mean, educating, upskilling administrators, coaches, getting new gear, a new recruitment drive for participation, getting more rugby development officers in the provinces and grassroots. So there's a lot which can happen, and for this you don't need a enormous amount of money. You just need to make sure that you have a very strong plan. And of course, by forcing the ownership model, the union will now have to force themselves to take on new innovation and new ideas. I mean, having tried to get safe tackle framework across the line with pretty much everyone, I can firsthand tell you that they just don't want to change. There is a significant amount of resistance to change. So what this model will do is bring some of those innovative ideas into the fold and actually force change. So that's why I am all for this, and that is why I'm arguing that this is a wonderful thing.
I'll agree with you on all the problems, and I agree that we need this, that we need innovative solutions. I just don't see how a bucket load of cash into an organisation that doesn't like to change will necessarily make those innovative changes happen, and how much it will just be paying to make sure that the old model just keeps rumbling on. That's my worry. I understand your point of view. Say, hey, look, it's got this cash in there. It will force change because there's another voice in there forcing change as well. Stephen, as having heard both or having heard two sides, where do you fall in this?
I'm very much with Boar. I believe money has to go back into the grassroots game, because sometimes you got to listen to what parents are saying. Why kids are falling off the radar. It's because it's too physical. Well, you need a bit of education and understanding about safety being a big part of the game. That's why I actually quite like Boar, and I must admit we had a really good hour conversation last Friday about it, and we pretty much sing from the same page. You want these kids to come through and feel safe playing the game. We all know that's what's happening at the moment. It's falling away. When kids fall away, not only the kids that fall away, but the parents fall away. Those are the people that go to the club rooms. Those are your next level or tier of volunteers that help the game. We're not talking about a phenomenal cash injection, because quite frankly, I'd rather see the All Blacks take a few hits, wait another 15, 20 odd years to win another World Cup, but rather see the game strong across the board, because that top level will eventually take care of itself. In terms of other sponsors out there, I don't see a lot of other sponsors knocking on the New Zealand Rugby Football Union's door at the moment. So this might be an opportunity that they go, okay, maybe we don't want to sell our soul here. But boy, other sponsors might go, well, hang on, Silver Lake offered it this money. Why?
There's a difference. There's a big difference between equity and a private equity investment and sponsorship. And I don't think, and whilst AIG is stepping away at the end of this year, having talked to people in the sponsorship industry, New Zealand Rugby will have no problems replacing them as sponsors because of the strength of the All Black brand. So it's not really about sponsors. It's about this. It's about I guess I agree with you as well that there needs to be change, and now whether it's to keep the grassroots viable. I guess the only difference is where the money and how we go about making that change happens is a disagreement. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Nocturnal Rights says, my fear is that a private company will simply want New Zealand Rugby to follow the American sports model of a small elite of players and a great mass of unfit fans. Look, I guess one of one of the things is that rugby has looked at American football since it's gone professional, gone, hey, let's look at what American football's managed to do. Can we do that? Now, to me, one of the things that American sport has done with the NFL, the NBA, is they've managed the great con of not having to invest any money in the development of players, because it's all done by high schools and universities for them, and then taking these ready-made athletes and then making cash out of them. Now, that doesn't work outside of the USA, because outside the USA, you have to have academies and you have to develop and grow your own players. So anyone who comes in and goes, okay, we're just going to put the American model onto rugby or football or any other sport in these other countries will find that they'll fail very quickly. And hopefully Silver Lake are bright enough, because let's be honest, they are very bright people, to realize that actually that's not what they can't do that. As I say, I think it's the great American con by those NFL, NBA top teams of not having to invest anything in their development of their teams. I see some nods there from you, Bo.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And if that same model is tried to be replicated here, it'll be absolute failure, because, this one thing I have to say is, I mean, what defines success for NZR? What does success look like for New Zealand as a rugby nation? I mean, is the All Blacks winning a World Cup and winning every competition around the corner for the next 10 years? Is that the be all and end all? Or are we looking at a wider spectrum where there's more investment, more player participation, more communal participation, more parents, more volunteers, more administrators coming into the game at the grassroots level, more clubs being viable? And I'm going to go back to a point which Steve made on how it doesn't take a lot of money for a smaller club in a community to stay afloat. All it needs is the community to come back to the club. And this is where I think the cash injection will come quite handy, and getting the right people in the right seats, i.e. the RDOs, making sure that they take the message to the community, get those players and participation rates coming back. So it's going to be a very interesting, I'd say next 3 to 4 years will define how this whole strategy is clearly laid out and how it is executed. I'm very positive. I'm very much for change. I'm very comfortable with change, and I've always championed this sort of thing. And this will actually be a shock to a lot of people, especially at headquarters in Wellington. But I think it's a wonderful thing. We just need to come up with a very clear plan, and there will be some very strong voices from within the key provincial unions actually pushing very hard to get more investment back into the grassroots.
Absolutely, and I think we're on the same page. We both want change. We both want a strong plan. The question is, how do we get to that plan? Now, you said, how do we? What does success look like for New Zealand rugby? And I guess one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago was, by looking at the executive team, you can look at where New Zealand rugby's priorities are, because that's where they've got. So you've got a CEO, which is obviously the Mark Robinson. You then have a general manager of people, safety and wellbeing, basically HR, which obviously you need. Then you've got Steve Lancaster, who covers off on community rugby. So at least community rugby has a say. Chris Lendrum is general manager of professional rugby and performance. You've then also got Darren Shad, which is the All Blacks manager. And then everyone else we've got a commercial officer, so that's obviously about money. Chief transformation officer and chief financial officer, dual role there. So again, money. Chief information officer, so that's IT and that's it. So basically, what have we got here? We've got one person for community rugby. We've got two for professional rugby, two people for commercial or money, and one person for marketing via the CIO. So that gives you a balance as to where. As to where are the New Zealand rugby's priorities. It's around professional, money, and then to a lesser extent commercial. Community. Zero for women's rugby in there, which I think is an interesting one that we came up with a while back, about a couple of weeks ago when we looked at it. So that guides you as to what are their focus, because that's who's at the top. They're making the decisions.
It is interesting, isn't it? The biggest growth area in the game, which is women's rugby, does not have representation at the highest executive table. But that is indicative of many businesses right across the world where, for some strange reason, and in this case, it so happens to be the women's development of the sport. It's a very, very good observation, and it gives you a very clear idea. So again, all I can hope for is, coming from a grassroots perspective, I'm a champion for grassroots. I sincerely hope that there's significant resource, and actually there's resource to train people so that we can actually start giving volunteers in the grassroots setup a clear pathway in whatever areas they choose, be it coaching, playing, being managers, administrators, holding a bar license, whatever it is, so that there's a very clear-cut pathway so that they can move forward and be in the professional setup themselves.
Yeah, there's two oddities to me, guys. The first one is in and around women's rugby. Like, for example, when they're talking numbers or numbers playing, they will shout that from the rooftops. But obviously, there's absolutely no representation there. They'll also talk a really good fight in and around the safety of the game and how the game is officiated. But when there's an opportunity to listen to grassroots about why numbers are falling away, about why we should be looking at a safe tackle framework, they're very resistant. To me, it's very weird, because they all go hand in hand, and it seems like they just pick and choose what they want. Well, whilst there are some things I agree with them on, I think that, you talk about a ball drop. This is a monumental ball drop that they are making at the minute.
Yeah. Aaron makes a point that even this show does not have women representation. That's very true. We don't. If there are any women out there who'd like to join us, do let us know. I'm more than happy. Put bluntly. We're all three of us are big into grassroots rugby. I'm down at Waihi Rugby Club every Thursday for training, and I'm also videoing their senior A's game. Boa, you for many years have been involved with Manukau Rovers as their technical consultant and coaching in there. And we met down at Manukau Rovers as I came down to cover one of your games. And that's how you've also come across Stephen. He also gets around the Auckland club scene and also Northland club scene as well, getting into seeing lots of clubs. So we're all very pro grassroots rugby. That's very true. Look, guys, I'm not sure there's much more to say about this one apart from it'll be interesting to see how mediation goes tomorrow, or if we hear anything out of that. I think there's about a month to go until the provinces all have a meet up and have a vote on this one, because at the end of the day, the New Zealand rugby is kind of owned, as it were, in quotes, by the provincial unions. The provincial unions will vote on whether this Silver Lake deal goes through or not, and it's a simple majority. So if 50.1%, I'm not sure how many. I don't know how many unions there are, but if more than half of them vote yes, this deal goes through. Apparently, it looks like it might need the Rugby Players Association to sign off as well. Yes, there's still about a month to go before the deadline, before that vote. So I'm sure. So if you don't hear anything tomorrow, don't worry. There's time, I guess, is my message to people in general.
Look, guys, I think the deal's a done deal. This whole process is managing everything. I think it's done, because the reality is, game to survive, i.e. the NZR to survive, they need the coin. So we'll wait and see. There you go. Arun says money.
And New Zealand rugby is by no means unique in this situation, right? We are seeing games being played and being forced to be played in Europe in situations when they shouldn't be being played, to be honest with you, due to COVID, because they need the cash and they need that TV cash. The whole point of the whole reason that France-Scotland game got delayed and actually played rather than cancelled was purely down to money, and the unions just basically not being able to give up. Why is the British and Irish Lions going ahead in South Africa this year? Because they need the TV money. All of this stuff is so. This is not a New Zealand rugby thing, a unique thing at all. You're seeing it. I mean, The Rainbow Cup will happen because otherwise Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and Italy are all financially in trouble, as are South Africa. So all these games are so yeah. Look, this is we're not in a unique situation here. It's a stress that's happening across the board, folks. And Stephen, you touched on it earlier, but the Mitre 10 Cup is going to have the exact same form. Is going to stick with the same format. New Zealand Rugby has been pushing for change now for about 12 months or so, I think, really, to try and change this, maybe a bit longer. But they're holding off until next year. As you say, maybe it's down to money. What I found interesting was that the Farah Palmer Cup, which did split into a north-south divide, which is what they want to do with the Mitre 10 Cup, is reverting back to a Premiership Championship model. So, Stephen, what's the right model and where's all this going?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I say, I think there's a bit of horse trading going on, and I actually think the unions have been smart enough to seize on an opportunity here, because I suspect if we didn't have this Silver Lake deal in front of us, I think the rugby union would have probably just forced the unions into a change of sorts. So I think you've got that hanging over them. I just got a funny little suspicion about it, and I quite like the fact that the women's game, the Farah Palmer Cup, has gone back to the original format, because I do think there would probably, if you probably look at it at the end of the day, I'm not sure if we actually saw our 4 best women's team in that final based on the regional setup that they used in 2020, guys. And listen, I'm not too sad about it. I actually like the idea of the Mitre 10 Cup and the way it's split. I just think at the end of the day, a lot of these unions have just got to be a little bit more careful with their costs. Obviously, one thing I agree with is the fact that rugby unions now have only got to have 15 player union development contracts on their book, as opposed to 45, 50. Not great news for Auckland, but boy, there's probably 60 or 70 grand just saved. Just like that. I think they've just got to be a little bit more wise in your spending. Listen, at the end of the day, I think there's enough good players around. You don't have to lock all the players up on contracts.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think, Steve, you make a very valid point. I mean, from business point of view, every time you take $1 out of the business, you got to think twice. And we're in that sort of era at the moment, So there's no need to sort of buy up the whole entire roster. And I can look at so many competitions right around the world where the big spending club owner will buy 40 contracted players, out of which 37 proper test caps. And only 23 can play on game day. So, the unions, I think, and from a policy point of view, NZR have to make it very clear to the provincial unions that, there to be some guidelines put around the recruiting and what they can and can't spend. So maybe all that will get sorted after this deal goes through.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. Look, the women's game clearly, the Farah Palmer Cup clearly is a lot less mature than the Mitre 10 Cup, because you've got provinces like Tasman that have only been around for a few years. Taranaki's, I think, like maybe this will be their third season, I think it is. And so, look, there's I mean, even Northern did very well last year. I think it's only their second season that they had a team in the Farah Palmer Cup. Maybe they had one before, but that's in recent times, that is. So, look, I think a championship and premiership and championship is very much needed in that situation where you've got brand new teams being stood up against teams that have been around for 20, 30, 40 odd years, that have got a lot more institutional knowledge about playing. So, yeah, I do think it's I think it's the right model there for the Mitre 10 Cup. I like Premiership Championship, because otherwise I'd never get to see Southland play, right, in the flesh, because they would never play a team up north. If I wouldn't, so basically around half the teams I would never get to see play. Now, let's be honest, I'm the exception rather than the rule, because I get to a stupid amount of my 10 Cup games, probably more than anybody who isn't employed by Sky, put bluntly, including New Zealand rugby people. So yes, I am the exception to the rule. I get that, but it does mean Auckland fans would go forever and never seeing Southland, never seeing Otago. Sure, they would see Canterbury and Tasman occasionally for finals when they got to host them, but otherwise they would never get to see those players in the flesh, and I think that would be sad personally.
Paul, isn't it great? Isn't it great to you don't have to be? Isn't there something very, very special, dare I say it, when you do see one of the big dogs get knocked off by a Southland or one of those smaller provinces, and you just go, wow, these guys have got nowhere near the player base of their big city brothers. But for a lot of those guys who go and represent a Southland or a Manawatu or a Northland, boy, that could be the biggest game they ever play. And for those supporters, supporters who support those teams, never forget those victories. Boy, let me tell you, I know from experience myself how important it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, Manawatu this year, I mean, with Brett Cameron and a couple of other signings, they're looking pretty. They've been in the doldrums for a few years, but I wouldn't. I've said they've signed a few players. I wouldn't write off Manawatu this season. Probably better off next year when they've had some time together. But Manawatu could be I think it's going to be a much tougher prospect than people are expecting this season, for example. So, it's. I like that colour, and I think would lose some colour of the tournament by splitting it north-south. I get that it saves on travel costs, and that is important. But I think what's more important really is that these unions need to figure out how to get people through the turnstiles and how to increase the spectators at the games. Does it mean taking games round to regional club rugby, to club grounds, and helping clubs develop their grounds so they can have 1,000 people, 2,000 people, maybe even 3,000 people at a game at club grounds? Is that the way to do it? Now, for someone like Auckland, where everyone can travel, it's to travel to Eden Park or to a set venue. It's not such a big deal. But for Northland, you're looking at a 5-hour drive, top to north, right? Who's going to do a 10-hour round trip to go watch a rugby game? People down in Wellsford, I've got no idea what's the name of the most northern town in Northland, Stephen. But Southland, similar, very big areas. If you don't take the game to these people, they're never going to see these games. They're never going to get inspired by that. So I do think that's a lot more work, a lot more innovative work by the provinces could be used to get out to increase their fan base. Personally, but I think I'm probably on a soapbox here, ranting about stuff I've ranted about many times before.
That's okay, Paul. We still love you, so it's all good.
Yeah, but we agree with you. We totally agree with you.
Yeah, you're talking to two of the biggest convertents. So
I'm talking. Yeah. Exactly. This is why I allow you on the show. Is because you agree with me. So the final piece, or another piece, actually, two more pieces we need to talk about. First up, the All Blacks. So this year it's 100 years since the All Blacks played their first ever game against the Springboks. It's also their 100th game. I think first off, wow, they average one game a year. And when you consider at the moment, they've been playing up to 3 or 4 games against each other recently. It's not going to be 100 years before they play the next 100 games, is it, Bella?
No, not at all. And I'm going to have another crack at world champions in Reading. I was looking at. I was looking at the rankings, and whenever the rankings come out, England has gone up one place to number 3. There was a lot of chatter on social media about it. Look, but in all seriousness, nothing actually replicates the intensity of a All Black Springbok Test match. And I think from a rugby fans' point of view, it's amazing to watch, even on live television, a game played between the Boks and the All Blacks in South Africa, a place like Durban or even the Highveld in Loftus. That intensity, that rivalry. So the sooner we can get this show back on the road, the better it is. And hopefully South Africa will drop down to number 2 as well in the process. Maybe that's why they don't want to play us.
Right. So Aaron asks, how has England gone up? England's gone up because they beat France. Basically, that's your answer. They had a really poor Six Nations, but they beat France. And I don't think they actually lost by big amounts. So yes. Simon makes a good point there that the Battle of the Bays would not be allowed with a North versus South, or would not take place in a North versus South format. So perhaps Battle of the Bays would turn into a pre-season warm-up game. Oh my word, that'd be a sad day. So those sort of things. So New Zealand Rugby reckons or is hoping that they'll get to obviously play that 100th game, hopefully here in New Zealand. They have not bid to host the Rugby Championship entirely here. They are hoping basically for a travel bubble with Australia, I think, and for the Rugby Championship to take place in Australia and New Zealand. South Africa said they do not want to host any, or they're unable to host any Rugby Championship games this year. I don't know what the situation is within Argentina, but from what I understand, it's not I don't think it's looking good there. So I think a Trans-Tasman Rugby Championship this year is what New Zealand Rugby are looking for. They're also hopeful that they'll get Italy and Fiji both into the country for mid-year tests as well. Fiji I can definitely see happening, but Italy will have to wait and see. That's a bit more questionable, I think. I remember my dad waking me up. So there's Aaron here. Back in the day to watch All Blacks versus Springboks with the refs always beating the All Blacks. Dear me. So clearly bashing of refs is not a new thing. It's actually a tradition.
It's in our DNA, Paul. It's in our DNA. And look, he makes it's a great point. Me personally, one of the great joys of being a All Black fan is waking up at about 4 a.m. to watch the test live in South Africa, the build-up, the pre-game chatter, and the South African panel, they're always very biased. They always, in some form or shape, label the All Blacks as cheats, especially when Richie McCaw was playing. But it's an experience within an experience. Waking up nice and early in the morning and then going back to bed around about 7 o'clock on a Sunday, knowing that the All Blacks have beaten the mighty Springboks.
Yep, Aaron, I was about to say, Aaron. Yes, I remember my dad waking me up as well, but that was to go and milk the cows while he watched the test match.
Oh, you're so hard done by Stephen. Dear me. Did he let you have it on the radio while you're milking the cows?
Yeah,
so the cows
I
listen
had
too?
to settle for while it was. We had
The
one
wireless.
of those old wireless that took a while to warm up, and you saw the bulbs. The brighter the bulb got, the louder the radio got. You remember having one of those wireless, and all the wires were exposed.
I still have one of those. I've got a couple at home, in fact, and they're solid as, and brings back all nostalgic memories.
Well, the sort of thing he used to hit a burglar over the head. To watch. Ashwin says he remembers his brother waking him up to watch. Oh, that might be Aaron. Oh dear. So Dr. Out says, when I was a kid, I got a copy of Men in Black and was staggered that the All Blacks had seemed to win all the tests all the time. I don't know what Men in Black was. That's obviously being an immigrant.
think Nocturnal Right should check out who the referee was. Test New Zealand played at home, and you might find it was one Pat Murphy or PJ Murphy. And they reckon that he had arthritis in the left arm. His arm only went one way.
Oh man.
So,
yeah.
Oh dear. Finally, Wayne Smith has been having a chat. He was on the breakdown the other night. The breakdown where actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this was so John Kerwin urges the players to trust New Zealand Rugby will do the right thing for the game. Geez, look, if an organisation has sold you up the river so many times. I'm sorry, JK, but look, just say, "Oh, trust them. They'll be good. It'll all be good." Yeah, right.
You can see the TUI billboards popping up all over the motorway. Oh man,
Deary me. Yes. When I heard him say it, I was just like, "Oh, geez, no." Anyway, Wayne Smith did talk about his time up in about how he plays the game up with Kobe Steelers, and how it's the first time he's been allowed to sort of implement the game plan he actually wanted to play, which is interesting, considering that Halsey, he is considered one of the best All Blacks technical thinkers as a coach. That he never was actually allowed to implement how he wanted to play until he went up there, which I thought was interesting. But he says, how many phases does it take to score a try? I'm picking it's probably 3 or 4 phases. Now, when someone like Wayne Smith says, I'm picking, it's probably, that's rubbish. He knows what the stats are, and he knows that he's not pulling that one out of his arse to say, oh, yes, I think it's this. So he reckons about 3/4 of tries come from within 3 or 4 phases. And so he says that if you're more effective and more efficient in those phases, and that multi-phase attacks aren't the way forward for scoring tries, and that keeping the ball alive is what he's really happy about watching the Highlanders play, and he thinks that they're actually perhaps the most innovative of the sides playing at the moment. Some thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, Paul. What I fully agree with Smithy. What's actually happening is, I mean, a good friend of ours, Dave Moffat, who was on the show a while back, he alluded to this about the McDonald's version of rugby, where it's very robotic. This whole 1-3-3-1. Soon as you get the ball, you go into these shapes, and next thing you know, it'll be triangles, squares, and octagons, and blah blah blah. It's very boring. It is very monotonous, and I fully agree with it. If you look at how France played their rugby in the Six Nations this year, they scored 80% of their tries within 4 phases. That's because they trusted their attacking instincts and they went for strike moves. We don't see this sort of trend anymore, unfortunately, mostly in international test rugby, as well as even Super Rugby. It's this whole phase after phase after phase. It takes a lot of discipline, and don't get me wrong, it takes a high degree of skill to be able to implement that sort of game plan with the players you have. But everyone plays the same game, and there's not much imagination. I'll tell you something very interesting. I was talking to absolute former All Black superstar. I'm not going to name names. He told me something very, very interesting. He says, Boa, the time New Zealand as a whole has gone away from playing what I would call real rugby. So I said, what does real rugby mean? And he said, real rugby is, you call a strike move, you back yourself, and you score a try, and you just listen to all the people clapping because they appreciate and understand what you've done. So, yeah, whilst that may stay true, I have to say, the game's evolved quite a bit with, defenses being a lot more structured. But, coaches really need to be a lot more creative when it comes to their attack and use some flair. And I think that's where a team like France has really shown up the entire world on how to play good rugby. And I'm completely with Smithy. We're seeing this in some of the Japanese top leagues, attacking patterns. Most teams are scoring well within the first 3 phases because, again, they get a set move, they go for it, and they score a try.
Now, there's a big difference here. So one of the points here is that that a lot of people say is, oh, the players are overcoached, therefore they can't blah blah blah. Now, this to me is absolute is is rubbish. What you're actually saying is they're coached into a conservative game plan rather than they're being overcoached. No, they're not being overcoached. They're being coached into doing things in a way that is a conservative game plan that goes through phases. You can equally coach people the same amount, but just give them more options and give them the choice of what to do. So do you run, when you have that pot of three, do both those players run a clear out line where they cannot get the ball, they cannot keep the ball alive, or does one of them, or do both of them run an offload line rather than the clear out line? Now, clearly, it's a higher risk strategy running those running an offload line because the guy might not be able to get his hands free. But one of them keeps the ball alive and makes something happen. The other one retains possession and is a conservative style. Both of them require the same amount of coaching and require the same amount of skills. But one is more attacking and more interesting than the other. So, yeah, I think overcoaching is a very lazy way of saying an excuse, in my opinion.
Guys, I was going to say, I agree with Wayne Smith with regards to the Highlanders. You even look at a champion team like the Crusaders, they will basically systematically break you down by being so accurate, where they basically force you into errors, force you into infractions, where they will just basically mentally grind you and utilize all the things that they do really well. So they pretty much sweat on mistakes and make you pay for it. You look at a team like the Hurricanes, very much a off the cuff type team, but the problem with the Hurricanes is they probably struggle up front, so they will never be able to get their share of quality ball to implement that sort of game plan. You look at a team like the Chiefs, a lot of their attack is built around somebody like Damian McKenzie, and boy, when he's on, he's absolutely on. But they once again they come up against a better Crusaders team, they get systematically shut down. I look at a team like the Blues at the moment, they are just trying to systematically shut you down, grind you down through your forwards. The problem with that, you can put so much focus into that sort of game plan when attacking opportunities actually do turn up. You haven't got the accuracy to implement that particular attack, and that's what I do like about the Highlanders. You look at a lot of the games this year; they've only been at times a little bit off. Even if you think back to that very first game where they played the Crusaders, man, it was just only little inaccuracies that did not get them across the line. And yeah, you can just see they are a well coached team, and that's the thing that I look at is the innovative coaches, guys.
The only other part.
One thing I think is unsurprising that about the fact that being the Highlanders is, I see Tony Brown as being the successor to Wayne Smith as being basically the number one technical attacking coach in World Rugby.
Yeah, look, the only other thing I'd add to what Smithy's saying is, goal kicking. We saw what Jody Barrett did. Jody Barrett 30, and the other team was, no match. We saw what Richie Mounga did when he went 9 from 9. So, if we can encourage coaches to be creative with their attacking options and also not neglect one of the easiest ways to get ahead on the points, which is to accumulate the points by kicking at goal. It's going to be New Zealand rugby as a whole is going to be a very, very difficult proposition to beat at any level. So, because this was something which was discussed at this year's Coach Developer and Coach Educator Symposium for New Zealand Rugby. And I was, very, very passionate in voicing that we need to take goal kicking a lot seriously at all levels. And it starts from the very young grades as well, so that we can progress that line of thinking all the way to the elite level. So everyone nodded their head and said, yep. And I'm so glad that we are actually starting to see people take shots at goal. And eventually that is what is proving to be the difference, especially in some of the Super Rugby Aotearoa games.
The ball's like honey to bees, a great mass around it for the quick. There was space. Back in the days, it was called the pack because they travelled around as a pack. Now they don't. Now they just spread out across the field. So calling them a pack is not right anymore. because very few teams have a pack. They have a number of pods and people spread out. Unsurprising that Wayne Smith is saying things and saying and putting truths out there. There's a lot of people who it's a shame that he's not involved in New Zealand rugby. He will be once his Japan contract is finished up, but that will be with Waihi Club Rugby. Not so. Looking forward to Wayne Smith coming down and joining us down at Waihi. There's someone that I wouldn't mind having a beer with after training on a Thursday night and just chatting about stuff. But boys, it's been an absolute joy having a beer with you guys because, well, you might not be having a beer, but I was. I was on the Moa Station IPA. Stephen, what beer were you on?
I was on the Dark No Sugar Guinness. So there you go. A little bit of fizz.
And Steve and Bella.
Well, unfortunately, I have no sponsor this season, so I'm looking forward. maybe I need to hit independent distilleries and maybe get some Asahi or something like that. Who knows?
Well, yes. If any independent breweries or any non-independent breweries would like to sponsor us, we're definitely open for sponsorship, and we're also open to supporters as well. If you're happy to head over to patreon.com/NZ Sport Radio, you can become a supporter of New Zealand Sport Radio, and really looking forward to the Super Rugby. To Super Rugby games, which I'll be getting to with the Chiefs. I've looking forward to the Women's Super Rugby and also Club Rugby because I will be bringing you reports from Waihi Rugby. Stephen, have you decided what your plans for the Club Rugby season are yet?
Yes, so I have this weekend. Well, first of all, I must say a big thank you to the Wellsford Rugby Club who hosted me last Saturday. Really, really enjoyable and good game of footy to start the Tyre Power Premier and Reserve Grade Rugby for the season. That's Northland Club Rugby, the sponsors of Northland Club Rugby, Tyre Power. And, of course, this Friday being Good Friday here in Auckland, I will be heading along to watch the start of the North Harbour Club Rugby, and I'm heading along to watch Takapuna taking on East Coast Bays. That's a 2 p.m. kickoff at Ornua Domain. And on the Saturday, I could be taking a nice leisurely drive up to Waipu to watch Kitty take on the home side Waipu. But at the moment, a little bit of a question mark beside that one, but definitely heading along to Takapuna on Saturday. Of course, that Auckland Club season doesn't start till the 10th of April.
So, Bo, have you got any pre-season games then for Manukau Rovers, or how's your preparation going?
Well, there's the Wakanathan happening next weekend. So as well as the Ballard Cup, which is kind of a knockout pre-season lead up to the Gallagher Premiership. The Gallagher Premier Shield, beg your pardon. And of course, there's a number of friendlies happening as well. Last weekend, we didn't have a game, so it was the Premiers playing the Premier Development, or who they used to be called the Senior Reserve Grade. So, boys had a decent enough hit out. Also, one thing I have to say is actually looking forward to be doing a bit of work with Counties Manukau. They're a very progressive union. They have... We've had some very interesting discussions around safe tackle framework, and they're actually willing to trial it as a whole in one of their competitions. So, some exciting developments around that. So I'll keep you guys posted on that.
Thank you very much. So, folks, obviously, you can join us at 7 a.m. every single morning for the morning sports briefing. Tomorrow night, we'll have our Rugby League and A-League football shows. So that's at 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. respectively. And then, obviously, as we head into the weekend, we have a Super Rugby preview and post-match reactions to the game. So a cracking lineup of shows here on NZ Sport Radio. Do have a fantastic week, folks, and thank you very much for joining us.